is unfinished business in life. And the third, often in competition with number two, is my own suffering. What happens to me after I go is a fourth. Another reason to call, significant injury or trauma, maybe sacramental needs. Roman Catholic patients gain profound strength from receiving the sacrament, Eucharist, perhaps anointing, and that's present in other religious traditions too. Maybe they need some resources. Often we are called simply because the patient needs a conversation and is afraid. So that's a great reason. And then what do we do? Various levels of support can happen. Your support as a nurse with the patient is going to be fragmentary as you focus on your clinical work. We find as you progress through nursing, you adapt to the crises that you're experiencing, but the workload, the sheer number of tasks you have to do just seem to increase. I just want to focus on that before I forget it. So in the first 3 months of nursing, full-time in a unit, usually you're functioning on what you've learned and what you've been trained for. And then in the next 3 months, the emotional burden starts to really hit. And those skills for coping start to get a little shaky. Then from 3 months to a year and a half, from 6 months to a year and a half, often people in healthcare professions go into a bit of a sadness or a depression, feeling more overwhelmed. And then from a year and a half or 2 years on to 5 years, what we see is connecting with inner resources, better ability to cope, and then from 5 years on to 30 years, able to access your inner wisdom, your intuitive ability to be with suffering without being overwhelmed by it. That's the natural trajectory. So we're here to support staff as well, and sit with nurses after a death or a difficult case, and help with what's going on. And that's moving into coping skills, so some cognitive behavioral techniques, stress management techniques, and then advanced ones include meditation. Journaling is fantastic to process spiritual pain. And then we can move up. This is more intensive treatment, so fewer patients looking at mind, body, spirit connections, and then going into prayer. Well, prayer is present throughout all of those, but mindful prayer, which is different. Some meditation techniques. The goal is spiritual consciousness, identification that I am not my body, I am a spirit with a body. And that's most practice when we are approaching death or a point of great suffering. Aware of the time, I want to leave some time for questions. What's the difference between psychology and spirituality? Well, they're not opposed to each other, they work together. Psychology usually deals with the way we project negative aspects of our consciousness, right? Parts of our woundedness, we project that into relationships, and we need to experience understanding and forgiveness. That also, of course, part of the circle of spirituality. Spirituality really connecting into a divine source, something much greater than you. Now that doesn't need to be overt. I don't always speak of God. In fact, sometimes God is never brought up in a conversation with the patient. But you're practicing the presence of compassion and awareness in order to experience reconciliation and congruent self instead of a self that is perceived as broken and separate from the world. Does it make a difference? This is a small study, 22 patients, incurable metastatic cancer, and they went through a fairly intensive 3-stage spiritual workshop. And those who had high involvement lived longer, and those with low involvement died earlier. Spirituality is not separate from biology. There's a direct correlation between them. It's simply the mind-body. You become stressed, your body responds. You become peaceful, your body responds. What do they call it? Psychoneuroimmunology is an exciting branch of spirituality in medicine that's discovering these things. So spirituality is good for you. When you are involved in a religious organization that is very strict and fear-based, it compromises your coping and your health outcomes on a general scale. When you're involved in a religious organization that supports you and is healthy, that activates your own healing. Beneath and behind all of this is God, or mystery, or life. However it is conceived or perceived, there is always this partnership in spiritual work that you're not And simply by going in and practicing compassion and wanting to care, often is all that you need. Open heart, closed mouth, full presence. I don't want to leave the last word to God, though. I like Leonard Cohen's words a lot better. Saints do not dissolve the chaos even for themselves. If they did, the world would have changed long ago. Far from flying with the angels, they trace the solid, bloody landscape. Their house is dangerous and finite, but they are at home in the world. They can love the shapes of human beings, the fine and twisted shapes of the heart. It's good to have among us such people, such balancing monsters of love. And he can write it, can't he? So that's an overview of spiritual care. Here in Halifax, we have mainly Christian chaplains, but we do have Buddhist students who come in, and we are distributed very thinly. I cover half of the hospital, and another staff chaplain covers the other half of the hospital. And then we have some denominational chaplains, which are gifts to the hospital, funded by their churches, and they fill in where they can. But all in all, we have only 5.5 full-time positions, covering hundreds and hundreds of patients and lots of staff. So while spiritual care may be a minority in your health institution, please know that it's alive and well as long as you are practicing compassion, really connecting with the patient's experience, even as you're caught up in the technical aspects of their care. Any questions? Any conversations? So that's really a common situation. You have people who are practicing quite a strict religion, and that's all that they've known. And now they're feeling suddenly overwhelmed, and the religious language and traditions cannot contain the depth of their experience, the reality of their death. It's just not adequate. So they question, right? So the best thing to do, again, is to embody the compassion and love that they're seeking, that they're desiring, and help them openly question and wrestle with it without fear of, oh, I can't say that, or what if I question my belief, does that mean I don't believe? ultimately, especially in the palliative situation, they are going to experience a profound love and peace. I've seen that so often happen just before death. It just overflows them and fills them. Sometimes, well, it's in the exact process of dying and just after. So what do? And you have a strong faith and religious practice and spirituality. So the first big thing is never impose your beliefs upon the patient. That's unethical. But you can reassure, you can comfort a patient by saying, well, here's something I said. I'm sure God loves you at least as much as the person who loves you the most in this world. We speak of God as love. How do you need love right now? What are you most afraid of? And let them say, I'm afraid there is no God. I'm afraid my faith has been in vain. I'm afraid I'm going to go to hell. Sometimes I've spoken of what a loving parent, what would a loving parent do? What would you do for your children? Let the answers come from them, but at that point your questions do become leading. Ask if they would be comfortable, if they ask you to pray with them, and you're okay to pray with them, that's powerful too. Let them lead in prayer, because that often becomes a powerful way for them to express their fears. Trust that you're not alone in the conversation, but trust that you don't need to have the answers to the questions they're asking. I don't know if that helps you.
So say you have a mental health patient, say they're schizophrenic, and part of their ideology has to do with they're hearing voices from God that are telling them to harm people or the devil or something. So how would you offer care for, like as a nurse, or how would you involve the chaplain with a situation like that?
So really delicate situation. In mental health cases, it's quite common for ideations and hallucinations and inner voices and the perception of God doing that. I've seen that so many times in mental health cases. And what do? Beneath those words is a lack of power, a desire for control, fear, right? And is their mental health condition. I have never worked directly in mental health. Speaking with my colleagues about that question, what I've learned is that you don't feed into the conversation literally, but you always bring it back to the patient. What do you need? I hear these voices saying, I should hurt that person, or that person's going to go to hell, or God talks directly to me. Then what does that do for you? How does it make you feel? Does it make you feel safe? Right? Coming back to the patient, not what did God say? How does it make you feel? What is your place? What is your purpose in this place? When did you feel that before? It makes me feel paranoid, it makes me feel scared, it makes me feel... And if you do your job well, digging into the feelings behind that person will fire you. They will make you leave, because you're getting close to the core anxiety, which will trigger their defense mechanisms, and then they'll push back against that and try to shut you down. And then, I don't expect that many people would want to do this, you bring it into relationship. How do you feel right now? How do you feel towards me? What would you be feeling if you didn't feel that? And the person says, I feel angry, I hate you, right? What would you be feeling if you didn't feel hatred? Because underneath that is fear. So then we're getting into some pretty deep stuff, which makes me glad I don't work in mental health. And God bless you for doing that. Wish you strength. But those are very difficult, profound conversations, and always do it in coordination with your healthcare team.
So you talked a lot about end of life and targeted care.
practice of your compassion will do 90% of that work. Your ability to accurately hear what the person, what a client is saying, what their level of pain is. Effective compassionate care is spiritual care. It has spiritual dimensions. If they are manifesting spiritual distress through, why did this happen to me? When am I ever going to get out of here? Those questions are very practical. Beneath it, again, is fear. So your presence will help the person feel safe. Simple reassurance. What you're feeling is natural. Yes, other patients have felt that too. Here's the normal course of healing. We're right here for you. Those sort of simple gestures. That's just like opening the window and saying, "Good morning, sunshine." You'll never know how it affects and touches their heart. Any other questions? The room's filling up. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Okay.